Hello, WFUV fans, New York Liberty fans, basketball fans of the world, or just some Miles Grossman fans. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm Gigi Speer, and I'm with the one and only Miles Grossman. Miles and I were both beat reporters for the New York Liberty last year through WFUV, and we had a great time. And I'm sure we're going to have a great time today because we're talking about the new additions to the New York Liberty. That's right. They have 3 players coming in from this year's draft class: Yara Sabali, Lorella Kubai, and Sika Kone. There's some 3 great post players coming in to add to this roster that made it to the playoffs last year. So I guess let's dive right in. Miles, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited. The Liberty season is now just around the corner. Excited to get back in the Barclays Center. And yeah, I'm really excited about this team. Like you mentioned, they were a playoff team last year. And they got a lot of talent, a lot of big talent, a lot of height. But the issue is obviously 2 out of 3 players in Niara Sabali and Sika Kone won't be playing this year. So they're kind of stash picks for the next few years. So I'm, along with some of my fellow Liberty fans, I'm a little frustrated to see, picks that aren't for right now, given that we're already a playoff team. It's such a competitive league. But I understand. I think that we picked up a lot of talent, and it was a solid draft.
Yeah, it was such a solid draft. I think that this is one of the best teams, the New York Liberty, and who they brought in. They did exactly what they needed to in expanding the height of their players and the power. But just to talk about the previous draft picks, 2 years ago, they had the number 1 pick, and that says a lot of all the growth that they've had over the past years, making the playoffs this year, or this past season, actually. And so, yeah, Sabrina Ionescu drafted first overall 2 years ago. There is so much good history. They also got Michaela Onyewerre and Didi Richards in last year's draft in the first and the second round with the 6th and 17th pick, respectively. And like I mentioned, 2 years ago, Sabrina Ionescu coming in first pick overall. And then also one of my favorite players ever to watch, Jasmine Jones, in that draft as well, the 12th pick overall. And then in the second round, they also got Kylie Shook, who dominated the post for them last year. And I'm sure they could use the additions that they're coming in this year with the post players. And we also have to mention that 2019 draft. So this is 3 years ago now, Asia Dur and Han Zhu coming in. And both of those players are coming back and are already participating in training camp. So it's just interesting to see that 2 players that were drafted over 2 years ago, Asia Dur and Han Zhu, are now back and practicing with the team and trying to find their role on the team. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And like we've mentioned already, the New York Liberty just barely made the playoffs last year by the skin of their teeth. And I think that when they picked up Steph Dolson in the offseason, we saw the projection of the team. Okay, we have to expand in the post. And then also bringing in Coach Sandy Brondello. And I think that that new leadership with her coming in is just going to show a lot. She mentioned a lot in her press conference from a couple months ago, that she wants the team to bond by themselves and to really use the talent that they already have. So I think that these 3 additions just make so much sense in addition to the other 3 that they got in the offseason and in Asia Dunn and Hanzu coming back.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really looking forward to that 2019 draft class, who the Liberty have barely seen so far since that 2019 draft class. Asia Dur battled the long haul COVID for a really long time. So it's very nice to see her back on the basketball court. She's so talented. Obviously, I don't know what kind of minutes she'll get right out of the gate, but I'm super excited for what she has. And obviously, Han Zhu hasn't played since the original COVID outbreak a couple of years ago, but she got some good work in Tokyo over the summer, and she was playing really well. And now she's 6'10". She's so young. She just turned 22 this year, or I guess last year, but she's only 22 years old. When she was 19 when she was drafted, which is the youngest player in that class. And I'm really excited to see she's still growing, exactly, which is unbelievable, 6'9" to 6'10". And she's so talented. She's huge. And it's just another weapon that Sabrina Ionescu will have to dish to. I think, Ionescu's been solid and she's been progressing, but I think we're definitely going to see her best basketball this season. And now that she has so many options, you mentioned Kylie Shook, who probably won't even get that many minutes now with all these new faces, these new post players coming in. But yeah, they've drafted so well from 2021. Didi Richards, 17th overall, absolutely so much upside for 17th overall there. Jasmine Jones, Sabrina Ionescu, that's an unbelievable draft class. So, and then Asia Dur and Hanzu, who we're just getting to see this year. So I think the Liberty, when you really look back at it, they're gonna be known as a team that drafted really well throughout this era. And it really goes to show that the front office is on the same page with the coaching staff. You know that Sabrina Ionescu is the point guard of the future. You absolutely know that. And then Jasmine Jones adds to that backcourt. But then you add so many of these post players and these tall 6'10", 6'8" options down in the post for Liberty. So I'm really excited. I think that it is a tad frustrating that we probably won't see 2/3 of this draft class in the 2022 season, but maybe in year 2 or year 3, we really will see the Liberty come into what could be a dynasty in a way, someone that was really going to be in playoff contention every year.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Sabrina Ionescu too, and she just came out today saying this is the healthiest she's ever felt after battling with so many ankle injuries. So she's ready for this season. I mean, they're going to gear up. Are you going to be at the first game, by the way? We have to talk about that.
I sure will. Will be there. I think I'll be there for their first preseason game, and then I'll absolutely be there for the season opener. That should be fun. And that one's on ESPN too, so it'll be a nationally televised one.
Oh my God. All right. So I'm going to watch it because I won't be there. But yeah, I mean, they're going to take on the Sun in a couple weeks. And like you mentioned, they'll take on the Washington Mystics, unannounced yet, but on April 30th for a preseason game. So I think that we're going to see over these next couple days and in the next week too, more coverage on the actual training camp, because I think they've been a little silent. Like we've seen pictures of players.
Yeah, not much besides the Twitter photos, huh?
It's just pictures and there's no videos from what I can see. And like, that's what I would actually love to see, because for me getting to know these draft picks, first of all, like that footage is what really matters, because I think that seeing these games live and in person is definitely something that the coaches in the front office did, like you said. But to see someone like Niara Sabali play in person, and like you said, we're not going to have her for this next season coming up right now, but she is so exciting to watch. And I think that she's going to work so well together with the pieces that they already have. And I know I mentioned this earlier when I was talking, and you said it first, is Sabrina Ionescu. We saw this whole last season, her coming into her role as a point guard. She played the shooting guard at Oregon and felt comfortable with that. So this was really her first time at the point. And I think that we could both agree that having great players in the post helps the point so much, because you're spreading the floor. And I also would say it helps shooters. And I said Jazz Jones, but I think the real shooters that we have to talk about are Rebecca Allen. And oh my God, I know I'm going to forget some, but it's just been so long. But there's just so much good talent outside in the perimeter. But then to be able to look in and look to other players besides Benijah Laney, who I think actually could like serve really well more on the perimeter. Oh my God, Sammy Wickham. That's what I was thinking of. She is so good. She like led the league in 3-point percentage last year for a while. And yeah, I think that there's no way this Liberty team just got worse, is what I have to say.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I feel like I didn't even mention Laney earlier, but she's someone, alongside with the point guard of the future in Ionescu, you have this veteran in Laney who that's your go-to scorer when the game is on the line. And it's so important for a young team like the Liberty to have that veteran presence that you can rely on down the stretch, because, as good as Sabrina is, as good as Ionescu is, it's like she's so early in her career. I don't feel that comfortable with her taking the last second shot, things like that. I don't know if she's the kind of bona fide bucket getter that Laney is. And Laney is so talented and such a good veteran presence. So you mentioned it's Allen and Whitcomb, and then obviously Howard as well. Howard is such a shooter at times, gets so hot. It's the perimeter players, and now they've added this young post presence, and obviously it's the 1 and 2 starting of Ionescu and Laney is such a solid core. So to build around that with young bigs is really exciting. And as I obviously said a couple times already, it's frustrating that we won't get to see 2/3 of the draft class this year. But when I think about the New York Liberty's trajectory, it's so bright. In the next 3 years, they could be a team that's really revered in the East because, they just have – it seems that everyone's on the same page and they're really just building towards a strong core when all these players are going to be in their prime at a similar time.
Yeah. I'm repping the Natasha Howard jersey right now. And what was sad was having her injured last year. And I think that could have really upped them in the standings. It really, I think, was everybody's or anyone's game for the playoffs and playoff contention and the standings throughout the league. But on average, she had 16.2 points. That is something that I think all of these new players in the draft class and even the 3 players coming in, definitely Stephanie Dosen, can add is that point presence. Not point guard, but like actual scoring presence.
Yeah, so many options scoring wise.
So many options. And Betnijah Laney getting the MVP call for the Liberty last year made so much sense. And I think something that always happens with the Liberty is Sab is the superstar. And she had so many fans and such a following in college that I think there's so much pressure on her to perform in the league. And hearing her as confident as she was in this press conference that just happened recently and saying that she's so healthy and she's so ready for this season and how hard it is to battle through injury.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot. And like, that's a statement to not only the league, but to the other players coming in, because she's like, okay, I'm ready. I'll feed you and you guys better be ready. So the other post player we mentioned from last year's team in Kylie Shook, who I think pulled up from 3 a lot of times for a post player. She had 5.7 points on average last year. But who you're bringing in, Niara Savali, you're not going to get this year, but you're getting a solid 15-point performance out of her in college on average. And then for Kubai, I think the most impressive thing is her defense and her ability to put up really impressive numbers, not only in scoring, but in rebounds. And I think that grabbing the board and then being able to go back up with it for the second chance point or dish it out again, I think is huge. And she has that defensive presence that I think that the Liberty actually stress a lot, considering that a lot of their really solid players, like you mentioned, Betnijah Laney is like kind of a vet. I mean, she's 28, but yeah, of course that's a vet.
This team, that is a vet.
That is a vet. Yeah, exactly. That if she could have that defensive presence, and for me, actually being at the draft, something that came up a lot again when players were asked what they're going to bring to their teams, it was energy. And I think that is something that a lot of teams could use, especially this Liberty team. Jazz Jones brings energy anytime she's on the floor, but she could be a little bit wish-washy with her scoring. So I think that Kubai could be that real energetic force that the Liberty could use throughout this whole season. And hopefully you get a taste of in the preseason game, in their first game at Barclays.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kubai was a steal because, like you mentioned, putbacks are so huge. When you think about the difference between an offensive rebound and a putback versus just a missed shot, it can be, when you get a putback, it's demoralizing for the other team. You can pick up so much momentum. So even just beyond the 2 points, it can really change the outlook on a game in an instant. So it'll be huge. And yeah, she's just one of the many big pieces that the Liberty have down low now.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because there's been so many times you're like, big pieces or something like that, and that's literally what they need to. I think that hopefully you could really see this, and I can't wait to see your report on it with the Sun, is who finished first place in the regular season last year but the Connecticut Sun, and the height and talent they have with Jonquel Jones. Something that I think we're seeing, not to compare the leagues, but I mean, I feel like I'm watching a lot of NBA right now. And I think there's more of a shift to the post presence rather than the 3-ball right now. Would you agree, in at least the NBA?
I don't know. I watched some Warriors basketball last night, so I can't really agree. But
Sure.
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a more reliable way to get a bucket, and I think you'll definitely see more of that in the WNBA this year because I think that 5 years ago you didn't see nearly as many 6'8", 6'9", 6'10s in the WNBA. So now that I think that a lot of teams are trying to find a big piece down low that they can rely on. Now obviously Brittany Griner's not currently playing. That's a unbelievable situation in her case. But, when you have a player equivalent to Brittany Griner who you can kind of just dish it down low to, and who's, against a vast majority of players on the court is just so much larger than they can't even compete for a board. That's such an advantage. And so I think, in Hanzhou this year, the Liberty really have potential to have, obviously not as strong and as physical of a player as Brittany Griner, but someone who can just box out almost everyone on the court, unless you have someone who's really as large as her, and that's rare. So I think Hanzhou is going to really going to have a year this year, a year that we may have expected out of her earlier, but with COVID and everything, she has not played whatsoever. But she's I could see her being an everyday starter in Liberty's lineup by the end of the year.
Yeah, and you mentioned her success in Tokyo where she was playing. It's crazy that when she did play games for the Liberty, I know one of the journalists out there, Liberty guy that we've probably both seen at games, said that she was a fan favorite. I wasn't going to games then, but I trust his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that New York fans especially love, is having a fan favorite. But I'm pretty sure she averaged like 3 points. So I am excited to see if she's coming back. I'm so excited to see how different her game is. Is it gonna be more blocks? Is it gonna be more steals? Like, you had a guard leading the team in blocks last year, and Rebecca Allen with like 1.2 blocks per game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's something, like you said, if getting a putback point is demoralizing, getting blocked is so demoralizing too, having that defensive presence. But yeah, is there anything else that you think the Liberty are gonna need to tweak before we go into a little bit more predictions for the season?
Well, I mean, I think it's obvious that this year isn't necessarily the year for the Liberty. I think they're on a really solid trajectory, and I think they did well at the draft. But I think everyone on Liberty would agree that this year isn't the year, and that they are building for the future, even though they might not admit that. When you choose two players who you're fully aware will not be playing this year because they're coming off knee injuries, you're not necessarily trying to win this year, and that's acceptable. It's a little frustrating that they're a playoff team that doesn't seem like they're seeing this year as the year, but I think they're on an unbelievable trajectory. I can't imagine what pieces they need to add. I think that they have a lot of good shooters on the wing, and they've added a lot of young height, and Sabrina and Lainey are currently the backcourt that I'm in love with. So I think that the future is really bright.
Okay, and so last year they finished 12-20. What are your predictions for this year coming up?
I think they will be in that 12-20 range. Hopefully near 500 basketball if possible. But I think, the year after, they will be a winning team for a fact. And the year following that, they will be a top 3 seed. But this year, I'm hoping for 500 basketball.
500. Okay, I like that. Miles, I think maybe just because you have a little more skin in the game because you're going to be at these games, you want to be right. I'm going to go a little crazy right now, and I'm going to say I think they're going to have a winning record this year. I think that they're so young, and they have so many good new pieces, especially in their coaching. And I also think that the way that we've seen, like we talked about before, the owners supporting these players, even if you got them a $500,000 fine, I think that's something that's huge. And I think they're going to have a better record at home than they did here. And I mean, they had a losing record at home, 7-9. So I'd like to see more fans coming out and more support, and just a little bit more pride in that seafoam color. And I think that that's where the biggest change is going to happen, is actually at Barclays, and you're going to be able to see it firsthand. And
I really do hope so, that the more fans come out, because it's an exciting team right now. I think they're at the start of a really golden era of Liberty basketball, and it was definitely frustrating to see the lack of fans. I wish that, the WNBA, I used to look up the ticket prices for the games I was at, and for an absolutely empty game at Barclays, the tickets would still be in that $40 to $50 range for not special seats. And that's always frustrating when,
Mhm.
it's an empty arena and they're not lowering the prices. And there's not much of a resale market on WNBA tickets, to be honest. So it's really like the WNBA controls, the particular franchise controls what they're selling their tickets for. And I wish that, I wish it was more affordable to go to a Liberty game. And I think that would incentivize a lot of fans because, obviously when it's not the NBA, you don't have the certain star power the NBA has. It's hard to demand a big ticket price because it's an exciting team and they deserve to have more of a core that shows up night in and night out, which they don't really have at this point in this era of Liberty basketball. But I think that they will have a better record at home. And I think the only reason why I will say that they're only going to be about 500 in my eyes this year is because they don't necessarily have the absolute really bona fide superstars that a lot of other teams have. Obviously, Brittany Griner's not there, but I remember I went to a couple games that Skylar Diggins-Smith, Diana Taurasi, and Brittany Griner came in, and it was just even if the Liberty played very well, which they did, they didn't really have just the talent to match down the stretch for a 3 superstar lineup like that. So there are a handful of teams like that where there's 2 superstar teams that it'll be tough for the Liberty to hang in those games against those top tier teams. But I think that 500 or possibly a winning record is absolutely a fair prediction.
Okay. All right. I love that. And I've loved talking to you. I completely agree with you. I think that there should be way more fans. And like I always say, the product sells itself. And they're just so exciting. And they only got better. They brought in a 6'2" player, 6'3", and a 6'5". And I think that that height in itself is going to be so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully the fans will be there. And I know I'm going to try and make it to some games too. And if you're watching this, I hope you're at a game. That's my challenge for you. And it shouldn't even be a challenge because it really is a gift to be able to see such great basketball. But for that, this has been a great time. Miles, this is a nice class coming in. They only got better. And also, it was so great to talk to you and to catch up too.
Absolutely.